Today on the Hill, the tale of two competing campaigns. In Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump taking an hour of questions from the press, hitting Kamala Harris on the issues, but also mounting personal attacks against the woman he'll face in the fall. While thousands of miles away, Harris with an appearance of her own, then just moments ago, for the first time since becoming the nominee, stopping very briefly to take reporters' questions before boarding Air Force Two.
I talked to my team. I want us to get an interview scheduled before the end of the month.
Okay, she is pulling. Now we're going to talk about Tim Walz and the fact that the Harris campaign is pulling rank, tweaking the Tim Walz military bio as the VP nominee takes fire on what he did and didn't do in his 24 years of military service. Is it stolen valor or a slander against those who serve? And it is on. The two candidates face-to-face in the same room in prime time, agreeing to at least one debate, and it will come soon. This as new polls provide fresh evidence of a Harris surge in the polls. But will it last? And it's pandemonium in San Diego. The governor names a special day for his state's newest residents. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Okay, the two opponents, Trump and Harris, 1,300 miles apart, but locked in a tightening race for the White House. And today, in a press conference, former President Trump answered a question that's been floating for weeks. Will he take his fight head-to-head in a debate with Kamala Harris? Trump says he's agreed to 3 debates, September 4th on Fox News, September 10th on ABC News, which was already scheduled, and September 25th on NBC News. Late today, Harris tweeting, then telling reporters she's down for at least one of those dates, September 10th.
Glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it, and hope he shows up.
Are you open to more debates?
I'm happy to have that conversation about an additional debate for after September 10th.
All right, mark your calendar, September 10th. We'll start planning here at NewsNation to cover that debate. Recently, Kamala Harris has called Trump scared to debate her, and at several stops on the campaign trail has challenged him to meet her on stage. Trump, in turn, has challenged her for her ability to hold a press conference today, saying this.
She's not doing any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. And I'm sorry, we need smart people.
As we've already seen, one debate can change everything and anything. So the first Democratic convention is in just 11 days. This Democratic convention is in 11 days. There's just one of them as far as I know. Then at least one debate that could make or break either candidate's chances of victory. It's yet another crucial stretch in what's already a wild campaign summer. Okay, joining us now, former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin. He's a surrogate for the Trump campaign, and he joins us now. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. I want to ask you, first of all, we heard that last soundbite from the former president about Kamala Harris not smart enough to hold a debate, hold a press conference. You represented a suburban district, New York 1, as it happens. Does the former president's performance today and over the course of the campaign, in comments like that, is that the new version of the former president, or is that kind of comment going to hurt him with the suburban women and suburban voters he so very much needs, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the battleground states?
I think the burden here is on the vice president to have that tough press conference, to have that tough interview. When she addressed today that she wants to schedule an interview, she referenced getting an interview done by the end of the month. Mike, it's the beginning of the month right now.
Right.
We're talking about here 3 weeks. So it's a burden on somebody who wants to be the president of the United States to get asked those tough questions and to have an answer. And there are a lot of questions. They keep getting discussed about us here in the media, at barbershops, on the streets, across our country. There's no better source to those issues to try to find out where Vice President Harris stands than for her to answer herself. The last time she was on camera talking about her position on whether or not she supports banning fracking, she said on camera she supports banning fracking. Now, on a Friday night at 6 o'clock, you have someone on your team saying, oh, by the way, that position's changed. Well, it's stuff like that I think the average American wants to hear directly from the candidate.
Okay, in the course of the last week, it's been 2.5 weeks since President Biden dropped out of the race. Kamala Harris, the vice president, has seen a surge in the polls. I mean, I think that's an objective fact. Do you think the former president, President Trump, and his campaign have underestimated her?
Well, let's be clear. The way the polling was going between Trump versus Biden was a disaster for the Democratic Party, for down-ballot races. All sorts of different Democratic constituencies were getting eroded. That was a reason cited for why they were trying to replace President Biden. What we see right now is a race. I mean, you and I are having this conversation here 89 days away from the last day of voting on November 5th. Ballots are going to start going out in just over a month. And when you look at the battleground states, the race is even closer. So we have a race. And I think that as of now, if the election was today, both sides would be going into the election with enough available support to win. It's about getting your people out to vote. But we still have 89 days to go and hopefully multiple debates to go.
Congressman, let me ask you just point blank. Do you think Kamala Harris is smart enough to conduct a press conference?
Well, she has a lot of trouble. She has had a lot of trouble off of the teleprompter. It is not a coincidence or an accident that she hasn't had a press conference. It is not a coincidence or an accident or a scheduling problem why she hasn't sat down yet for that tough press conference, the tough interview. So it's really up to her to do. To provide the American public with that level of transparency and assurance that she stands for what she claims to when people are out there saying, interpreting where she is on issues. Listen, if you right now go to Kamala Harris's website, there is no position on any issue. She has no issues page. So that leaves the rest of us speculating based off past record, past statements. It's up to her to do it, and you can't do it all from a teleprompter.
Okay, the former president in his press conference said today, he said this after President Biden warned in an interview yesterday that President Biden is not confident there would be a peaceful transfer of power if President Trump were to lose this election on November 5th.
Of course there'll be a peaceful transfer, and there was last time, and there'll be a peaceful transfer. I just hope we're going to have honest elections, that's all.
January 6th, he said it was a peaceful transfer of power. Do you agree? You were a member of Congress at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
Hey, listen, I've been outspoken then, I'm outspoken now. I don't want to ever see anyone at any point, whether it's a January 6th or any other day of the year, any year, breaking into the Capitol, breaking down windows, looting, harming other people. Spoke out against it then, and I always will. I will say that, Jamie Raskin, as an example, who is the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and I have it on the top of my social media feed, video his words. He is calling for, regardless of what happens on November 5th, no matter what the margin is, and even if we all universally agree it's free and fair election, he's calling on congressional Democrats not to certify it and to prepare for civil war. That is not the rhetoric we need today.
Okay, let me ask you one final question, Congressman. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are making 6 swing state stops this week. The former president only attending one rally. That's in the non-swing state of Montana. What's going on there? Is he making a mistake by not being in these swing states at this crucial time?
Well, I'm pretty sure that no one's going to be outworking President Trump in this campaign. If there's a particular week where a schedule gets analyzed like that. I mean, the fact is, President Trump did stand there for an hour answering any question from any reporter. President Trump has a schedule that I don't know if there's ever been a politician in our lifetime who has operated with the long days that he has, able to do 5 rallies in 5 states in a day. I'm sure we'll continue to see more of it between now and November 5th. He has run circles around opponents in the past. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2020. That's what we've been witnessing in 2024. And I'm sure that he's not going to be slowing down, especially as we're getting into this home stretch in September and October.
Okay, Congressman Lee Zeldin, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, joining me today on our superstar panel are super friends led by Ashley Davis. She's a former official in the George W. Bush administration. Chris Hahn is a NewsNation political contributor and former senior aide to Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer. Carly Atchison-Byrd, a Republican strategist and former national spokesperson for the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and our friend Brad Howard, a former senior aide to House Democrats. Okay, President Trump hit Harris over her lack of answering reporter questions so far. Says she's not smart. I mean, she let a little air out of the balloon today by stopping under the wing of Air Force Two. Carly, was that enough?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think it's good to see the Trump campaign go on offense. They've been hammering her on this, and it worked because she had to say, okay, I'll take an interview by the end of the month. But that's definitely not enough. I mean, she has slipped up on every single issue. She has a lot to answer for her record, both before serving as vice president when she was in the Senate, and in this administration. She has to answer for all of the failures of this administration, and she needs to do that. The American people deserve that.
Chris, on part of me, as a former chairman of a reporters committee who fought for access every day, who wanted public officials to answer questions all the time, thinks that she should be answering questions. Part of me, as a creature of Washington, understands the strategy. She's on a roll. Why change now?
Yeah, look, I mean, to be honest, any political consultant would say you don't need to answer questions until things start turning, which is why Trump went to the microphones today.
Right.
And I think that people who are on the Trump campaign, if you ask them honestly, to tell you honestly off the air what they thought of this press conference today, it was a total train wreck. It was a session of him just reliving his grievances, saying he's great and everybody else stinks, not giving any real answers, not telling the truth, by the way. You know, I expect that when elected officials and people who seek higher office speak to the press, that they answer the questions truthfully. He was not being truthful, and he went off about crowd size for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that
was
the same
lot
compared to Martin Luther King Jr.
It was a great
the same grievances he's had for 7 years. This is why the American people are tired of him, and they're not going to go back to it.
There is a movement that's happening with her that I do have to say, and I've been saying it for the last couple weeks. It's with young people and it's with women, and I don't think it helps when he does say that she's not smart. It kind of gets under your skin a little bit. I mean, it gets under my skin a little bit.
However, though, that you shouldn't say something like that.
But suburban women, though, and this is what the big thing that came out of that last segment is, suburban women are still going to care about crime, national security, the border, and the economy when they go to the polls. And yes, they don't like some of the things that Trump said since 2016. We know that. Right. But we're still only dealing with 5% of these undecided voters.
Yeah, it's 5 to 6% of voters in 5 states.
Right. Brad, last word on that.
Here's what I'll say the Kamala campaign is doing that's smart. They're running a campaign that's based in the reality of where voters are. They are ignoring the D.C. ecosystem. They are ignoring the charges that are coming out of the J.D. Vance and Trump world because they know how irrational and weird they are. They are playing directly to the voters. They know right now the name of the game is to consolidate your base, and they've done so beautifully. Completely. And now we're heading to the convention where they're going to put a period on it. They're going to pivot to the general. I think this is all, the Trump campaign is flailing here because it's such a terrible VP rollout, and they're tanking in the numbers.
Bump out of the convention. All right, coming up. 2 vice presidential candidates, 1 military showdown. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance both served their country. So how did the battle over military records become so heated? And look who made their debut today. Panda diplomacy returns to the U.S. Keep it here. You're watching The Hill on NewsNation. Welcome back to The Hill on NewsNation. There are new questions tonight about Tim Walz's military record. The Harris campaign now tweaking his bio page to say, quote, rising to the rank of command sergeant major, and used to be retired command sergeant major. The change comes after Republicans are ramping up attacks accusing Walz of lying about his National Guard rank and being in combat. J.D. Vance pointing to a clip shared by the Harris campaign showing Walz back in 2018, suggesting he used weapons in war.
I spent 25 years in the Army, and I hunt. We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
All right, the Trump campaign also accusing Walz of stolen valor. The Democratic National Committee holding a call today to discuss Walz's military record. 2 Democratic congressmen and veterans fired back at Republicans.
They just don't have anything. They have no ideas. They have no options but to try to do one of the worst things you can do in America, and that is attack a veteran.
I would be very cautious about opening the door to attacks on those who served honorably, because Donald Trump did not.
Okay, well, there you have it. Panel, this story has legs. Okay.
It does.
We've been talking about it for 3 days now. There was another story that popped up that it was like, Jewish Democrats are mad because he didn't pick Shapiro. That really hasn't panned out. But this one has given the Trump campaign some kind of traction.
So we
Chris,
just
I know
talked
you got
about
some things to say.
First of all, let's hear for the bald guy getting the job. Okay, just want to make that point. But second, if the 6% of voters that we were just talking about are talking about his military record versus Vance's military record, they've got nothing else to talk about. I don't believe that will come into play at all. First of all, I don't think people vote for the vice presidential candidate at all. Maybe in the home state, and that's why Shapiro would have been a good pick in some respect. But I think that this is not going to be a factor in the election. So we have nothing to talk about right now because it's August, and we're talking about this. I don't think this has legs at all.
It's not
and
really
he was
what
in the
the
Army. He
issue
was
is.
in the reserve for 24 years.
Yeah, and he did serve, so you have to give him some credit. Right. But I do think that the fact that we're talking just shows, does he lie? Is there a little bit? And that's all it is. Yeah. Is there a little bit of a gray area that he's not talking?
Did he embellish?
Did he embellish?
It's not like a George Santos level of embellishment.
Okay.
Right? It's, I carried a weapon of war.
Is anything on a George Santos level of embellishment, honestly? Wait a minute, hold on. We got a timeline here. First of all, the vice president did stop in that brief remarks on the tarmac, and she said, I praise anyone who served our country, not mentioning Tim Walz by name, which is kind of interesting, but we do have this timeline here. February 2005, he filed to run for Congress, and then March 2005, there was the possibility raised of a mobilization of his order to Iraq. In May 2005, he officially retired from the Army, and then July they were officially they were told they were going to deploy. They were activated, and then in the fall they were deployed to Iraq.
This is a story because he exaggerated. These are his words that they're using against him. If he hadn't,
what did he exaggerate?
They just played the clip. He said
what he said. He said the weapons of war that I carry.
Okay,
he carries guns. He didn't say I carry them into battle.
That's not what he said. And also, there are multiple examples of him exaggerating. Here's the thing: I come from a very heavy military area, Norfolk, Virginia. My father-in-law is a Navy SEAL. Anybody who serves is great, should be committed. All volunteer force, that's fine. But there is a big difference for people who serve, who went into combat, and those who didn't. Just don't exaggerate and lie about your record. Just say you served in the National Guard.
He misspoke in that clip from 10 years ago. That's, who cares?
Yes. I think veterans care.
I expect he will.
Right, for the record, he was deployed to Italy to backfill for a unit that was deployed for Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan.
Look, I just think that, Pete Buttigieg has a good line. Pete Buttigieg, who is a combat veteran, had a really good line. He says, this feels like the attack that, you're not a real patriotic American unless you have children. You're not a real veteran unless you saw combat. And that's a big problem here. I think it's a slippery slope for Republicans, particularly because their nominee dodged the draft 5 times. The last one being because of a bone spur.
About Walz's record.
Actually, you got to come back to
They're grasping at straws here. This is embarrassing.
I'm just saying the fact that the DNC is holding conference calls talking about it, it's an issue for them. It's taking up some air.
But it's also promoting his military service, so I think it's a win-win.
Donald Trump said the dating scene in New York City in the 80s was his personal Vietnam. How do veterans feel about that? He said it on the Howard Stern show. There is tape of it.
But that's how many years ago. You just said something 10 years ago doesn't count, but now you're bringing it up.
I want to add one other thing. I want to add one other thing very quickly. So our reporter, Joe Khalil, covers Congress and the White House. He talked to a guy named Al Bonifield, who served with Tim Walz, and described on the telephone, we played it over all day today, that Walz, they spoke for 45 minutes to half an hour, and he agonized over this decision, over whether or not he should go with his unit. Well, actually, whether he should run for Congress, knowing that he was now promoted to.
Well, he had already filed to run for Congress.
Right, Command Sergeant Major, which is, I think, the highest enlisted position in the United States.
It's the highest that's ever served in Congress.
Yeah. So, the whole Command Sergeant Major thing seems like a much smaller issue than leaving the impression of whether or not you actually served in combat, in war. You were subject to fire or you fired in hostility.
Yeah.
Correct. I think he's got to correct it. It was clearly a misspoken statement. But look, again, coming back to it, the fact we're talking about our Democratic vice presidential nominee having combat service or having military service is a good thing. And then when you look at, particularly compared to Donald Trump, who dodged a draft 5 times and used dad's money and connections to get out of serving in the Vietnam War, and then called his time in the sex scene of New York his own personal Vietnam.
This is just ridiculous. I'm getting more than me. I didn't join, ironically, because I didn't want to get the haircut.
All right. On that note, there's still much more ahead on the Hill. What about RFK Jr., by the way? He's lost in all these discussions, the independent presidential candidate. Staying in the race for now, but is his support slipping? And more importantly, if it is, where are his voters going? We'll look at the numbers, and we will be right back.
And the bottom line about UAW is that I also know, and I'll say to all the friends watching, look, even if you're not a member of a union, you better thank unions for that 5-day work week. You better thank unions for that 8-hour work day. You better thank unions for that vacation time. So I'm here to say thank you.
Okay, welcome back to the Hill on NewsNation. That, of course, was Vice President Kamala Harris a short time ago addressing the United Auto Workers Union in Wayne, Michigan. Her campaign's two-day swing through the state comes as Harris faces growing criticism for dodging the media. She did let a little air out of that balloon today when she spoke briefly to reporters on the tarmac in Detroit. Joining me now is the Democratic representative from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Jennifer McClellan. She is the Commonwealth of Virginia's first black congresswoman, and now she is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Welcome, Congresswoman. Thanks for joining us. What do you make right now of the state of the campaign? Kamala Harris obviously surging, but is it a sugar high, or is this going to carry her through to November?
This is going to carry her through to November. What I am seeing, not just in the crowds that she and Governor Walz are speaking to, but what I see here on the ground, what I'm seeing at canvas launches, what I'm hearing on the ground in Virginia and North Carolina, where I've been since she's been the nominee. This is bigger than President Obama and the 2008 campaign. I think because it's brought joy back. You have a very qualified candidate who is energizing people, who will make history. But we also see just how stark the contrast is and just how high the stakes are, much higher than they were in 2008. And people are excited in a way that I haven't seen in a long time.
Bigger than President Obama in 2008. That's quite a claim, given the historic nature of that presidency. Can you give me a little bit more on that? Why do you say that?
Because when President Obama ran, there was huge excitement, don't get me wrong, and he was an exciting candidate who energized people of all ages. He was making history, but he was running against a Republican who, by comparison to Donald Trump, was moderate and normal and decent and kind. And we saw just how devastating Donald Trump's first presidency was. We see how high the stakes are for reproductive freedom, for our economy, for our democracy, for our freedoms. And there's been a heavy, dark cloud over America with the politics of anger, division, and chaos since Donald Trump arrived on the scene. And so people understand this is a choice between joy and building on progress of an America that leaves no one behind versus the dark, chaotic, dystopian view of Donald Trump.
All right. Well, the vice president just a few moments ago, speaking to reporters on the tarmac in Detroit, says she wants her team to schedule an interview with the media, I would presume, by the end of the month. Okay, it's August 8th. Why not sooner?
Well, we've got a little convention coming up. She has only been the nominee for about 2 weeks, and she needs to get out and talk to voters. She has been talking to the press on Air Force One, and so she's going to sit down in an interview, but she is making her case directly to the American people. She will also make her case to the mainstream media, and she is making her case on social media and to content creators. People get their news from a wide variety of sources now, more than ever before. But she's making her case directly to the American people.
Well, I mean, if she is speaking to reporters on Air Force Two, I think it's off the record because we certainly haven't seen any tape of that. But she is drawing more support from traditional Democratic core supporters in the black community, probably more than what President Biden was back when he was in the race. There you see, we have a statistic up on the screen there. Joe Biden was 59-9. Kamala Harris way up to 70% support among black voters. Do you expect her to be able to hold that support and bring black voters home as we approach November 5th?
I do. First of all, she's one of us, despite Donald Trump's thoughts to the contrary, because she is biracial. She'll be the first black woman president, and she'll be the first Indian woman president, and we understand that she will continue to build on the record of the Biden-Harris administration of building up the black community, but all communities, and leaving no community behind. We're very excited about it, and we're very excited to see representation in the highest office of the land in Kamala Harris. Okay,
Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, thank you very much for joining us. I know Congress is away and the convention is coming up. Panel, all right. Takeaways from what we just talked about and what was the waning support for the Democratic presidential nominee among black voters.
There's just one thing I want to talk about. This is the second time today that Democrats are saying that she is bringing joy to the campaign. So comparing to 2008, after Bush and after the wars and after the financial...
The Hopi changey thing?
The hope change, that worked. He was not the current vice president of the United States. Three-fourths of America do not feel that they're better off today than they were 4 years ago, with the border that she was in charge of, with the economy that their administration was in charge of. Mm-hmm. So she can't come in right now and just talk about joy like she hasn't been responsible for the last 3.5 years.
Fair point or no?
Do you think the American people really think about the vice president? This is the thing. I've been having this conversation with people who are smart like you. I don't think they do. I don't think that anybody wakes up and thinks that the vice president is in charge of anything. I think they think like Harry Truman. It's not worth a bucket of spit, right?
I don't think people vote for VP. Okay. I agree with you on that.
But I don't think they even think and consider it. So even though she is not she's not in the position where she's an outsider coming in. You're correct about that. I just don't think there's deeply held beliefs about her at all. So the rollout has been fantastic, and she has, as you pointed out, consolidated the base in a way that I didn't think was possible. Democrats are hopeful and excited, probably because they thought they were dead. It reminds me of that scene in Armageddon where the transmission's broken and then the other transmission comes over the hill. Everybody's happy. We live.
Can they hang the border on her? Can they hang the economy on her?
I mean, try.
They can, they should, and we need to get back to that. I am so happy that they are going to debate each other one-on-one because, let's be honest, there is a reason that they're relying heavily on paid media, outside influencers, TikTok, and other things. She is prone to gaffes. She has a record of just kind of jumbling and not making sense when she's going off when she's going off the fly. They know that. Her team is smart. Why would you open your candidate up to something where they're not a strong suit? But here's the other point I want to make in terms of can they hang the border on her? Yes, and they should. But that, in my opinion, the onus is on Republicans to do that.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to name you last word. Brad, last word.
Here's why Republicans are kind of freaking out right now, because what they're seeing is discipline. Right, this is a disciplined campaign. It's been a disciplined candidate. She is locking down the base. This is what you do when you head into the convention. My hope is that the convention, they pivot to the swing election. And to Ashley's point, which is a very good one, is that we've got to start winning over swing voters, because there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers for yet. She hasn't produced answers for you. What are we going to do on immigration? What are we going to do in the Middle East? What are we going to do in inflation? And she's got to start rolling out these policies. I suspect she will, but we got to give her time. Right now, the focus of the campaign is to ride the honeymoon, man. We are rolling strong. Democrats are happy and unified. Did you see how she shouted down that Palestinian protester? That was glorious. I mean,
Democrats are happy because they don't have somebody who literally has dementia at the top of their
head. That's not true at all. We are happy. We have a candidate motivating
debate because they're lowering expectations for her, and I love it. Keep it up.
September 10th, man, that's going to be some kind of debate.
Oh, my goodness.
Especially with that old guy.
All right, look, I'm going to stop you now so we have time to talk later, okay? Coming up, it's hard to believe, but it was just Monday when Kamala Harris officially became the nominee. She's closed the gap over with Donald Trump, the gap that he had over President Biden, but the question is, will it last? We'll look at some new numbers and talk with the numbers wizards at Decision Desk HQ. That's coming up after the break.
NewsNation tonight. A wanted man on the run for over 20 years at the top of America's most wanted list. A U.S. fugitive was finally captured while working as a cop. How police finally tracked him down and his surprising response to law enforcement. Vanfield tonight.
The general election, and right now the race is more or less a dead heat between the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and the former President, Donald Trump. So where do we focus? Where do we look to find a key to who's going to win this election? Joining me now to break down the state of the race is Scott Tranter, Decision Desk HQ Data Science Director. Scott, thanks very much for joining us. Okay, let's just give you a broad question to kick this off. What does the latest Decision Desk HQ polling tell us about the state of the race?
it shows a very close race. If we were having this conversation a month ago, it was clearly a Donald Trump advantage. Today, it's statistically tied. The trend has gone Harris's way, and we are back now to a razor-thin race.
Okay, so we're sort of in uncharted territory. I hate to use cliches, but really, I mean, when have we seen a series of events unfold like this over the course of the last, I guess, since June 27th and then July 21st when President Biden dropped out? Do we have a historical precedent? And if it does, what does it tell us about how this is going to shake out?
There is no historical precedent for this, right? Like, you and I are used to the campaign season heating up after Labor Day. Right. The kind of stuff that's happened in the last month, an attempted assassination on a candidate, we haven't seen something like that in 50 plus years. The dropping out of a candidate before a nomination, haven't seen that in any of the modern times. And then the swing in the polls, also very different. We don't usually see poll movement like this. And so that's why the race has gone from, pretty sleepy to, again, a focus and a real close one.
Okay, so is there any indication that you can tell of how durable this surge that Kamala Harris is experiencing that we were just talking about, how durable it's going to be? Obviously, Democrats are euphoric. They've closed there was joy, as the Congresswoman we just talked to mentioned. They've closed the enthusiasm gap. They're heading into the convention. There's always a bump out of the convention for whatever party's holding the convention. Can it last, do you think?
So let me give you a data point for it lasting and a data point for not lasting. Yeah, so a data point for it lasting is this. Look, a lot of these voters that she's getting back were voters that we were looking at in the crosstabs were sitting on the sidelines for Joe Biden. So these were voters who were predisposed to voting for Joe Biden, but just couldn't get there. And so now, Kamala Harris is giving them some excitement. So that's a data point for it staying there. The data point for it not staying there, look, they've already told us, these voters already told us that they are willing to sit it out or go to a third-party candidate or vote for Donald Trump. So, VP Harris, she could lose those voters in the next couple months as she gets out there in campaigns. And we see that happen in polls a lot.
That's fascinating. I mean, we're just on the edge of our seats here. This is going to be a race unlike any other. So the former president, Friday night going to Montana. He hasn't been out really for a rally. He held that press conference today at Mar-a-Lago. But he's going to Montana. He's got a 15-point lead against Kamala Harris there. I mean, Montana and its 4 electoral votes, not in doubt there. Yeah, there's a tight Senate race, but should that be the priority? And why? And does it hurt him, do you think, in the blue wall states, as we're calling them now, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, not paying attention? How much attention does he need to be? Should he be there instead of in Bozeman this Friday, for example?
Look, the numbers say he should be sitting in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, right? Like, all the data that tells us whoever wins Pennsylvania has an 85% chance of winning the presidency. So that's where the data tells him to be. The argument for being in Montana, look, if he's going to be the next president, he wants a Senate majority. And that goes through a state like Montana. So that could be a reason why he's there. But by and large, if you're there for the big office, you should be in one of those blue wall states.
Right. And to be fair, if Democrat Tester loses Montana, then it's game over for Senate and Republicans take control. But I do want to go quickly to Robert F. Kennedy and his candidacy. He's still in the race, still a three-way race, at least nominally, although he seems to be slipping significantly for reasons that may be obvious at this point, given his checkered past with bears and wildlife. So if he stays in the race, I know we've been discussing this ad nauseum for the last months. Who's he pulling from? And more specifically, he's losing support, and where is that support going?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If we had that graph it up a month ago, he wouldn't be sitting at 4, he'd be sitting at 8. And so where did most of those 4 points go? Most of those 4 points went to Kamala Harris. Not all of them. Really? Some of them went to Donald Trump, but a good chunk of them went to Kamala Harris, at least at the national level. If we got down to the state level, it's a little bit different. But at the national level, that's where it's going. It's interesting. I think historically, third-party candidates like this, we look at Ralph Nader in 2000, they usually end up with 1 or 2% of the vote. That's kind of where he was trending, that 10-point watermark he was at maybe 8 or 9 months ago. We knew that was the high watermark. But he's coming down. And one other thing I'd point out, he's not on enough ballots statewide or nationwide to, even if he won all the states he was in, he couldn't be president. So, that's really pulling away from his electability argument.
Okay. Scott Tranter, thanks very much. That was really interesting. Great conversation. Okay. Now, all right. Take a look at this here, you guys. Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz debut their viral, I guess it's gone viral, camo cap. It had already sold out within 30 minutes. That's 3,000 hats, they claim, bringing in nearly $1 million in sales. Those are expensive hats. Okay, panel, what do you see? We're going to do our nightly Rorschach test when you look at this cap here. Start with you, Brad.
It's also in Hunter Orange. Let's point that out. No, this is clearly an attempt they think they can make a play. Governor Walz there's a lot of really nice photos of him carrying livestock and pigs and stuff, wearing camo hats. So it's a play to that effort there. Real quick on the polling, I think what Democrats need to be mindful of, and not to dampen the enthusiasm here, is we can't just slightly be ahead of the Republican in order if we're going to win. It shows because of the Electoral College, she has to get 52% of the vote to really knock it out of the park here. So we've still got some work to do as Democrats, and we've got to win over these remaining 5 to 7% of the votes.
Carly, what do you see in that hat? I was going down.
No, I want to not talk about the hat. Go ahead.
I want to do 2 points because I'm going to do one on the hat thing. Like, I don't care what kind of merchandise they're selling. I want to know why Kamala Harris says she supports a gun buyback program, and does she still support that? Don't give me the camo hats, and I think the media is falling for it and lavishing all over them. The point I want to make about Donald Trump going to Montana is a very, very interesting state right now.
My wife's from Montana. Happy to hear that.
Democrats have spent for over a year over $20 million going against Tim Sheehy, and that poll that just came out, he is still up. And I think people are sleeping on races like in Montana that have just as much, if not more, about which direction Washington is going to go in November. And I think that Donald Trump, that's a team player move to go out to Montana and help your candidate get across the finish line. I love to see that.
No, and that's exactly, sorry, I just got to say this. They're in lockstep with Senator Daines and the head of the Republican Senate committee that's doing. And so that's why he's going there.
You realize
also,
that Steve Daines is from Montana.
Correct.
Segment,
and that's
right? You're supposed to look at the picture and say something funny. Like, old guys
really
love hats.
Okay, but you know, camo, you made a great point.
You guys go
nuts. And so now they're embracing the camo. But the other thing I have to say, everyone keeps acting like Donald Trump doesn't go to rallies and doesn't have rallies because he doesn't have one this week. Remember, just a couple rallies ago, he was shot.
Yep.
Okay. You think that's a conscious decision to stay away from rallies?
No, but I'm just
saying, they were telling him to not have any more rallies outside.
Can I also say, talking about the polling, you're right. He was shot a couple of weeks ago, and I believe that there's a little bit of a sugar high from that, because even I felt sympathetic towards Trump after that, and I would imagine that that's showing up in the polls right now too, and will wear off. And I'm thinking somewhere around September 25th.
All right, so much for the hat.
I think it's going to wear off her. Yeah.
Wear off him.
They tried to get a lot of bites on the hat.
He's an artificial high.
All right, guys, coming up, a live look at the White House, where 50 years ago today, what happened, guys? History was made in the Oval Office. We'll discuss that when The Hill returns.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
Welcome back to The Hill on NewsNation. That, of course, was President Richard Nixon 50 years ago announcing he would resign the presidency, as he put it, effective noon tomorrow. He'd said that to the nation in a televised address from the Oval Office. He was the first president in American history to do that. The resignation came amid impeachment proceedings against Nixon for his involvement in the Watergate scandal, the break-in and wiretapping at the Democratic National Committee headquarters located over in Foggy Bottom at the Watergate complex. Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in as his successor. A month later, Ford issued a full pardon to Nixon for any offenses he committed. It was very, very controversial. Panel, we live in polarized times today, our country very divided, but here's my threshold question for you. I'll start with you, Carly. Could Nixon have survived today?
Yes.
Because
I think so.
I'm going to tell you why I agree, and I'm going to tell you why I agree. Everybody's in their own partisan ecosystem.
Yep.
Right? The Republican media would have come to his defense. They would have found ways and talking points, and it would have been the same way if the roles had been reversed. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats dominated Washington for years around this time, and so it was the Republicans that ultimately went to him and said, "You got to step aside here."
Barry Goldwater
and that's why he did.
Baker, right?
And I just don't think you would see the Republicans do that. And even if they did, if they had someone like Donald Trump, he would be, "Get out of my office, I'm not resigning."
Right. And Mitch McConnell walked right up to impeaching or voting to.
Yeah, but never did.
But I think either party would do it. Like if it were a Democrat president, then there would
no way.
I don't know.
No Democrat would survive it. None.
Because we
never.
That's just
ever.
Let's survive what?
No Democrat.
If we broke the law like that,
break the law like that and survive, Democrats would get rid of that.
As the advisor to House moderates, we would be the first to fold and say,
I don't even know what to say, Menendez.
Absolutely.
Well, you were here with me when the Menendez news broke. I was like, get him out. Yeah. Get him out.
But you're just
or how about Benghazi and Secretary of State?
Well, that was nothing there.
Benghazi, you mean the talking points? Oh, no.
All right.
I mean,
American service members died, so I don't know the talking points.
We got to have you guys back.
Also, she was already out of office.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move now. We're going to shift gears. We're going to grind them. The latest today from the Summer Olympics in Paris. Team USA so far takes home the most medals, 103, ahead of China with 73. And late-breaking news, Ashley informs me that without any spoilers here, the U.S. is now leading the gold medal chase. Sprinter Noah Lyles took home the bronze in the 200-meter race. I guess that's a spoiler. He was seen gasping for air leaving the track in a wheel. Oh, that's not funny. I didn't know this. Leaving the track in a wheelchair. Later, wearing a mask, speaking to reporters, Lyles said he's tested positive for COVID earlier this week. And the men's basketball team beat Serbia today, advancing to compete against the Olympic host nation, France, Saturday for gold. Okay, we're going to end.
Can I do a spoiler?
Well,
just on the basketball, people should watch it.
Oh, people should watch it.
Because it was like a nail biter.
All right, cool. Tonight, panda diplomacy is making a comeback. Speaking of Nixon, two giant pandas made their first public appearance at the San Diego Zoo today. Yu Chuan and Xin Bao arrived back in June on loan from China. The zoo says they are the first pandas to arrive in the U.S. in more than 2 decades. And of course, they took back our pandas from the National Zoo here in Washington, but I understand we're going to get some more. California Governor Gavin Newsom celebrated the panda's debut by declaring today, August 8th, as California Panda Day. Okay, that's all we have for today.
Thank you, Joe Biden, by the way, for the
classy, Vaccaro.